Hello everyone. Today I will be discussing how I adapted food teaching for students with special learning difficulties using evidence based strategies like chunking and visual pictorial aids. This is framed around guidance from the SCND Code of Practice and NASIN. Today's session will give you a clear conceptual understanding of SCND. Based on the Statutory Code of Practice, I will explore the four broad areas of need and how they relate to practical teaching, such as food education. What is SCND? SCND is about identifying barriers to learning and providing the right support. These needs can range from mild to complex and may change over time. Understanding them helps us become more inclusive and effective teachers. The four broad areas of SCND, these four categories were outlined in the 2015 SCND Code of Practice. They help us understand how a student learning might be affected and what kind of support may be needed. Many students will have needs that span more than one of these areas. This is a summary table of key categories. This table gives a clear comparison of the four areas. These categories aren't boxes, but lenses. A student might show needs across two or more areas. The key is to be flexible and responsive in our planning. This is my literature review. Based on my literature review, today I will be discussing how I adapted food teaching for students with special learning difficulties using evidence based strategies like chunking and visual pictorial aids. This is framed around guidance from the SCND Code of Practice and NASIN. We can look at some importance of adaptation. According to the DFE 2015, food education is particularly challenging for learners with special learning difficulties due to its reliance on sequencing, memory, and sometimes complex instruction. Adapting our approach isn't just best practice, it's a legal obligation under the SCN Code of Practice. The SCN Code of Practice, the 2015 SCN Code of Practice, provides the statutory framework. It states that high quality teaching adapted for individual needs is a first step in responding to SCND. Collaboration is key. The pedagogical approaches I use for adaptation: task chunking, which is visual demonstration instructions; visual pictorial aids, recipe cards, visual step-by-step photos. I will explain below the benefit and limitation of these strategies. Let's look at what is chunking. Chunking breaks tasks into bite-sized sequential instructions. For example, instead of saying to the students, make the mac and cheese, I guide the students through each part of the recipe, step by step practical demonstration. According to Alloway and Gadacole 2008, states that while chunking is effective, it should be used with the goal of fading support, not creating learned dependency. Instead, we should scaffold the learning to foster problem solving and resilience. Visual pictorial aid. Visual aid help bridge language and cognitive gaps. Communication in print allows instruction to be clearly represented. This is especially useful for students with ASD or speech language difficulties. However, based on its strength and limitation, Hodgson 1995 and Meyer and Morino 2023 critiques that visual should complement, not replace, other teaching methods. Students should gradually interpret texts and verbal clues without always depending on images. This is my case study. My presentation focuses on three students with special learning difficulties in accordance with my school data. Special learning difficulties is an umbrella term for a range of learning difficulties. However, I have chosen to use the pedagogical strategies, for example, chunking, as we said earlier. The benefit supports working memory, improve task engagement, and builds procedural fluency. And the second strategy I have used, visual pictorial aid, which promotes independency, reduce anxiety, and improve task flow, especially effective for students with multiple learning needs. This has been supported by Schneider and Crombie 2003 and others. However, there are limitations to using these strategies, which we will critique later in the presentation. Original adaptation recipe. This is an original recipe which was for my practical lesson. I have adapted this recipe in a step-by-step pictorial format to help students to be more confident in cooking and completing the final product. The task breaks down complex activities as essential for clarity and pacing. This is the adaptation that I have created. In food teaching, the pressure to complete tasks, follow safety protocols, and manage equipment can be overwhelming for students. That's why I have used the strategies chunking and visual aid to support inclusive practice by breaking down tasks. These are some of my student responses. I provided a question along with my lesson assessment by asking students on how confident they were cooking with the pictorial step-by-step recipe as they use answers to justify their responses. These are the feedback based on student responses after completing the step-by-step pictorial recipe. The impact and my professional views. According to my literature review, Professionals working in SCND education, educational psychology, and inclusive curriculum design largely agrees that chunking and visual pictorial aids are highly effective strategies for supporting students with special learning difficulties, especially in practical subjects like food education. However, there might be some limitation as we look at some critical approaches below. Critical approaches. Despite the strength, professionals acknowledge limitations and areas for improvement in the application of these strategies. For example, over reliance on simplification. Teachers worry that breaking down tasks too much may lead to learned helplessness or limit opportunities for critical thinking and problem solving. Lack of student voice. Many interventions are adult designed. Greater involvement of learners in co designing visual aids could improve relevance and engagement. Inconsistency in implication. A 2020 study by Twisell found that some food classrooms lack consistent use of symbol-supported instructions due to time constraint and lack of training. These are some improvement and the alteration of this lesson. I have acknowledged some improvement needed according to my literature review. To enhance the effectiveness of strategies like chunking and visual aids for learners with SCND, professionals recommended several improvements. For example, firstly, visual support should be tailored and personalized to reflect students' developmental and cognitive levels, according to Nassim 2021. Reflective practice is key, therefore, regularly assess the impact of intervention and adjust accordingly. Co-designing resources with students can increase engagement and foster independence. Lastly, integrating chunking and visual with other inclusive approaches such as peer modeling, assistive technology, and sensory-based learning further strengths and access. In conclusion, effective food teaching for special learning difficulties, students require both thoughtful planning and responsive teaching. It's about building skills, confidence, and ultimately independence through inclusive, flexible strategies. SCN is about removing barriers to participation and achievement. However, effective inclusion requires awareness, planning, and reflection. In addition, all students benefit from inclusive strategies, not just those with identified SCND. Also, understanding SCND helps become better teachers for all learners. Good SCN practice is good practice. It creates a classroom where everyone can access learning, feel valued, and make progress. These are my references from the foundation of my professional understanding of SCND in adapting food lesson. Thank you for watching.